The Denver Broncos only have one draft pick in the first 2 rounds. Then they have less than $22 million. They have right at $22 million in cap space and not a lot of options in free agency. And they need a lot of work on that defensive line. Want to see how they can fix it? Find out now on Gridiron Gaya Pro Style.
The autumn winds move like the thunderous waves of Neptune's sacred palace. And here, amongst the blackened soil, lies the ragged hands, worn, torn, and callous. They await with cunning and vicious prowess, for the warriors have returned.
Come on, Dirt! Don't do it! Woo! No way! Woo! 85! Crying out loud! You're making me, you're driving me nuts!
But behold,
Welcome, you guys, to another off-season edition of Gridiron Gaya Pro Style. I am your host, Mr. CeeLo here, talking all things pro football, as always, you guys, as we are in an exciting off-season. And this time, we are featuring the off-season of the Denver Broncos. A team who finished surprisingly at 8-9, I might add, under first-year head coach Sean Payton. And it had its share of fireworks. And surprisingly, this Denver Broncos team was second in the AFC West. And as we have seen, there have been a lot of players that the Broncos have moved on from. But before we can get started in the future, we kind of have to look. As the Broncos struggled mightily in close games, they were just a 500 team when it came to games under 6 points or less. And as we know in the NFL, which is a parity-driven league, those are important. You know, those games can make and break your season, as most Minnesota Vikings fans know from the 2022 season. I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of situations that the Broncos were in last season, they were a little overmatched for their competition, especially on the offensive side. The defense was not that bad, but we could look to the inability to stop the run. But as I always do, I look at the tail of the tape when it comes to the turnover margin. You guys know I love to talk about that turnover margin. To me, that is one of the most telling signs as to whether or not a team is going to be successful or not. Well, we look here, the Broncos were a +4, which tells me they did not necessarily take the ball away a lot, but they just did not turn it over much. They turned it over a grand total of 22 times, and they turned the other team over 26 times. You have 15 fumbles and 11 interceptions. Well, looking here, you can honestly say that this was probably better than last year's Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson, where he turned the ball over a lot last season. But he only had 9 interceptions this season. And this is the real reason why I and many people took issue with the handling of Russell Wilson last year, the way Sean Payton did. And, you know, it was just really it was not called for, because Wilson was only responsible for 1 lost fumble last season. And you could argue so many times that the sacks that he took last year were, I think we got accustomed to seeing him escape the way he did in the past and make plays on the run, but we forget that Russell Wilson is not necessarily a spring chicken anymore. He turned 35 in November, but needless to say, Bronco fans, I'm sure many of you are not happy to see him go, but then there's some of you that were okay with seeing him go, which leads us to the Broncos currently. They only have Ben DiNucci and Jarrett Stidham on the roster. Now, I refuse to think that Jarrett Stidham or Ben DiNucci are going to be the starters, which is the reason why I believed Sean Payton benched Russell Wilson in the last 2 games of last season. He wanted to see what he had at quarterback, and obviously he does not have much. But let's also flip to this defense so we can get to what initially has happened in free agency. But the defense, on the other hand, was not, it was not bad. But then you look and you see the guys like Justin Simmons, whom was one of the top players on this defense. And he had to be a cap casualty. So he ended up being released. And this is looking at so many of the Bronco Nation and individuals that do podcasts in Denver. They said this one is not just a guy you lost leadership with. This is a guy that you lose not only leadership, but you lose production. I'm talking about massive production. People don't even understand just how good Justin Simmons and how important he was on this Denver Broncos roster. A lot of people will say, okay, well, this guy was this and he was that, but he wasn't out there as much and this, that, and the other. Let's not pretend that this is not going to hurt. Look at this: 70 tackles, 1 sack, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery just in 2023. And you have to go back and you really have to look at how important Justin Simmons has been since 2016 when he was the 98th pick out of the 3rd round. This guy has a grand total of 603 tackles, 4.5 sacks, not overly impressive, but 30 interceptions. This is a guy that has been a major player, and he also has 1 return for a touchdown. So this is not only just leadership that you're losing. This is a guy that you are losing that is a huge producer on that defense, a guy that knows what you want to do defensively. However many coaching staffs that you've been through, he has been a constant baller for a defense that has been suspect in a lot of areas. Especially when you look back with this defense has not been able to stop the run, not efficiently. And I remember reading a graphic that said this defense was one of the worst at winning run battles, run block win victories on defense. They were at the bottom next to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think the Kansas City Chiefs were the only team that was worse, if you can believe that. But they don't have Patrick Mahomes either. But looking also at what the Denver Broncos lost, you could argue, you've got Kawan Williams, Josie Jewell, who signed with the Carolina Panthers. I was happy about that. One of the leading tacklers on this defense. Defensive lineman Jonathan Harris. I mean, you can say this was a guy that was not a big deal, but you could say arguably Justin Simmons was replaced by Brandon Jones from Miami. They did bring in Malcolm DeLoach from New Orleans, and then they brought in Cody Barton. One of the best signings that they had, because he was a tackling machine out of the Commanders. That was a loss that the Commanders couldn't afford to have, but the Broncos did make a good move on that one. But looking here, making the trade with for Jerry Jeudy to the Browns, and you kind of gotten a little bit of space there and got a couple of picks with the 5th or 6th round, which is okay, but you don't necessarily gain a whole lot because Jeudy was your second leading receiver, but he was really not developing into that superstar talented wide receiver that everybody thought he was going to be coming out of Alabama. Now, was that maybe due to the coaching staff continuously changing? Possibly. But you still are going to need, they being Denver, are going to need a guy that can be the possible catalyst for the slot guy or the X guy that's going to be lined up with on the opposite side of one Cortland Sutton. And Marvin Mims could possibly be that guy. We think he could be, but he was great at Oklahoma, but it all depends. I mean, Sean Payton can do if he's capable. Like I said, I think Payton's a good coach when he's not trying to spread his ego all over the place. But I didn't see a lot of good play calling out of Denver last year. I thought they were in a lot of games that you could argue they shouldn't have been. But moving forward, looking defensively, there are a lot of pieces that are not here in Josie Jewell, Justin Simmons. Now you can't argue. Patrick Surtain is the second is one of the best defensive backs in the league. And what are they going to do to move forward? You've got to be able to stop the run if you're going to be able to get pressures. And reading this graphic, guys, I was looking up. I do extensive research, guys. I did not know this until I looked it up. But the Broncos only were ranked 21st and were tied for 21st in sacks last season at 42. They were 29th in quarterback pressures, 100th. They were 29th in quarterback pressures. They were 16th in quarterback hits at 100, and they were 31st in quarterback hurries. That is not good for a team that already had guys like Justin Simmons on it. Now, looking at 2023, now we can start to look and evaluate what the Broncos have in the draft. Now, the Broncos currently have $22 million in cap space. Now, the interesting part about that is they have the 12th pick in the draft, and they don't get another pick until the third round at their pick. But then they have, interesting enough, 6 picks after. Yes, they have 6 picks after the after the third round. They'll have a 4th round pick, of 3 5th round picks, and 2 6th. Now, I'm going to be straight honest with you guys. For me, I would be trading those picks to move up a little bit at a time and possibly trying to get back in this third round, because this draft is going to be exceptionally deep. And the Broncos have to find a way to get some draft capital, because, looking here, and I'm going to give you a best case scenario, Bronco fans, even if you're able to get into free agency, now you got $22 million. You're not going to spend, I would roughly say you're going to need about roughly $7 million, maybe $6 million to sign your draft picks. This is what I suggest that the Broncos do. First of all, in free agency, if you look here, you could very well still get your quarterback in the third round. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, who are you going to get in the third round that's going to be capable of being a top-notch starter? Now, a lot of people are going to say, don't do it. Don't do it. I'm going to say do it, because here's the reality. You've got a couple of guys that Sean Payton could take and make superstars out of, because I'm going to be honest with you, if he can get the right receivers around the quarterback that he chooses, he could very well make this a star. And I will tell you guys, the player that I truly believe that he could take in possibly the third round, that he could make into a star. This is going to sound crazy. It's going to be one or two guys. I want you guys to listen to me. I want you to think carefully. It's going to be none other than Jordan Travis and possibly Spencer Rattler. Now, the problem with him is his ability to read the defense and understand that his athleticism allows for mistakes that it allows for mistakes that his offensive line makes to be less detrimental to the team if he can understand how to use his athleticism, something he did not do well at South Carolina. And I remember there was one game where he was just tearing up the opposing team. And then in the second half, they just blitzed him crazy, and he didn't know where it was coming from. He didn't know what to do. Now, with Sean Payton getting a guy like this, he could very much utilize that skill set and get him to understand, because he has a lot of potential. We saw that at Oklahoma and then we saw it in spurts at South Carolina. Same thing with Jordan Travis. He's a great athlete, a really deep competitor, and guess what? He's got a guy just like Keon Coleman and Cortland Sutton already in Denver. He's capable of making so many plays, much like a younger version of Russell Wilson, who was also selected in the 3rd round. So we could very well look at Jordan Travis and what the Broncos could do. Even with this, they could take and get somebody like a Ryan Tannehill on a 1-year deal and make this thing work to an extent, and maybe just kind of use that bridge yet again, like we talked about. You make that bridge quarterback, and as he's still healing up, you've got Ryan Tannehill that's out there, and you have Teddy Bridgewater, as well as I said, you got Teddy Bridgewater, and you still got Joe Flacco. So, yeah, you've got options out there if that's the route you want to go. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, those are not great options. Listen, at this point, you have to work it. And right now, like I said, when Joe Flacco went into Cleveland, he made the noise that he made. Who could have expected that? But as I said, back to the draft, guys. The way I look at this, if you can take one of these two guys and get them and make this work, I believe that Sean Payton has a skill set when it comes to certain style quarterbacks. He runs what you call a back to front type of offense. Well, let's give me a back to front offense. He likes to throw it down the field, but he'll eat you up from the front. That's what he likes to do. And on the flip side, what I would do if I'm in this draft, I'm looking to see if I can't get 2 picks in that 3rd round. See if I can't maybe move up from those 2 6 to get a 5th, and then take 2 or 3 of those 5ths, move up into the 4th, then maybe take a couple of those 4ths and get back into that 3rd. Because you have to be able to get some key players out of this draft that are going to be huge in the upcoming year. These guys are going to have to play quick. And the reality of it is, you are not going to get the top defensive lineman in this draft. And see, Denver has to get some pass rush. Now, they could go in the free agent market. That was something that I was looking at earlier. They could go free agency and take one of the big 2. Randy Gregory's a good one, but he's 32. Yannick Ngakoue is a guy that is very interesting. He's a guy I thought Denver should have tried to go all in earlier when Danielle Hunter was available. That's what I felt like they should have done. They should have tried to go all in on this guy, and they missed it. DJ Reader was another guy that they really could have really worked and snatched. Now, Fletcher Cox is still available. He's 30. No, excuse me. Fletcher Cox is retired. I'm sorry, you guys. Carl Lawson is a guy that is interesting. He's still available, and I don't know where this is going to go. Calais Campbell has not said anything outside of anything. But then there's Austin Johnson, 30-year-old Austin Johnson. You have to make moves to get this defensive line back to where it was. This is not something you can play with right now. If you're the Denver Broncos, you have to fix this defensive front. And honestly, as I said before, I would try to trade down as far as I can, because there are 2 guys in this draft that the Broncos should seriously consider going at. Now, you could trade down possibly towards near the end of the first round. And this is why. You need to try to trade down as far as you can, because there's 2 guys that you could end up getting that could change your roster immediately. One guy is going to be probably a second rounder, 6'5", 296-pound Darius Robinson. You could get this guy, trade down, possibly get 2 more low-end first-round picks and a possible second-round pick. Get Darius Robinson. And then here's the other beautiful thing. You're not going to get Jared Verse. But what you could end up doing, if you're the Denver Broncos, I want you to watch me, you guys. I want you to look. You could very well, now people are going to say they don't really need interior defenders, you can always use a good interior defender. I don't care. Especially a guy, and this is one would be in a 4th round. You could get him with one of your 4th round picks. A guy like Myles Murphy. I watched this guy in the Clemson game, and he was good. And then you got a guy like a Tyler Davis. You could put both of these guys on the same team. These two guys would be really impressive. And then there's where'd he go? Tavondre Sweat. But here's the thing: 6'4", 362 pounds. Here's the thing: his size is just immense. He eats up blockers. Something the Denver Broncos has to have on this defense. He's an impact, versatile defender that you could very well put him on every side. But as we said, you look at the 362, his weight and his conditioning is probably going to determine where his career goes. But when he's at his best, he is impossible to stop. I will put it like this: if Denver is willing to take a risk on him, he is a high 3rd round pick, low 2nd. It's going to depend on which franchise decides to take a shot on him. Now, you could take him, and then you could take a shot at Michael Hall, who is considered a defensive interior guy, but you could put him at a bounce out position. You could make him like a hybrid Chris Jones type guy. He is what I think the Denver Broncos need. Michael Hall out of Ohio State. Now, many people have probably not seen him, but I saw him in the Notre Dame game. I saw how explosive he was in some situations. But here's what's got to happen. Denver's got to build this guy around. What's going to happen is you're going to have a vet there. That's why I was more inclined to get a defensive end. And if they can sign somebody like a Tyus Bowser, who's only 29 years old, or a Carl Lawson, who's 29 years old. Yannick Ngakoue would be huge. You have to do what you have to do as far as getting the run game in check, because you have some great players on the back end. But you have to be able to stop the runs and be able to get teams in these pass rushing situations, and they have not been able to do that. Meanwhile, you could still get your quarterback. You could still get your quarterback and still be capable of pulling off something. You have Marvin Mims and you have Cortland Sutton. And you still have guys like Hunter Renfrow, who's free agents, and Tyler Boyd's still floating around out there. Michael Thomas is out there, the old vet from New Orleans. You could very well see Sean Payton take a shot on his old player, because honestly, he's really never been the same player since he got hurt. And really, he's never been the same since the retirement of Drew Brees. It's really been kind of downhill. And a guy who Sean Payton could really use in a Taysom Hill type role is Cordero Patterson. He's a free agent. So as we're sitting here and we're talking about the draft, I ultimately think the Denver Broncos need to trade down as far as they can get into the 1st round and accumulate assets. But what you don't want to do is keep allowing teams to come up from, let's say you're at 12 pick. You don't want a team that's right there at 29, 30 to come up, because what's going to happen is, you may accumulate assets, but you won't accumulate nearly as many assets. You may get a first next year. You need to accumulate assets in this particular draft, because there is a abundance of riches in this draft, especially at the defensive tackle and defensive end position. If you somehow could manage to get 2 picks in this 1st round just by trading that number 12 pick you have, oh my goodness, you'd be back in the game just like that. Just by accumulating 2 1st round picks, even if they're late picks, you could go get another wide receiver, or you could even get a scenario. Let's say you get 2 high-end 1st round picks right there at the end of the 1st round. You could very well end up taking a guy. Let's say you get a low-end 1st round pick and a 2nd round pick. You're not going to get one of the top defensive tackles in Newton and Murphy, but you could very well get Braden Fisk out of Florida State, 6'5", 297. But you could also get, watch me, look at me, you guys, watch me. You could end up getting a guy like Leatu Latu Or you could get Chris Bracewell, 6'3", 255, or you could get Chop Robinson. The very gifted Chop Robinson, whom a lot of people are sitting there saying he could very well end up being Micah Parsons 2.0. But as I said, what the Broncos are going to have to do, they're going to have to unlock some of this draft capital. They're going to have to be willing to say, hey, look, let's get off this 12 pick. Let's accumulate draft stock. Let's get some capital and make a smart move. There is a good quarterback in this draft class outside of the first round. Sean Payton's got to say, I've got to be willing to build it. Now, moving forward, if the Broncos pull this off, they should be in good shape. But they've got to take the draft and draft down. They're going to have to trade out, and they're going to have to take the remaining free agent money that they have, and they're going to have to use it on the defense. Or they're going to have to take it and get Ryan Tannehill to be the bridge quarterback, because they don't have their starter on the roster right now. Unless they're going to take their quarterback, whether it be Spencer Rattler or Jordan Travis, and have him start day one. Don't think so. But, guys, let me know what you think about the Denver Broncos and what you guys think about my analysis of this. I think ultimately that the Broncos should trade down and try to spend at least another $14-15 million of that $22 million cap space, unless they get accumulate a lot of draft picks. But as I said, give me your comments. Go to my Facebook page of the same name, Gridiron Gab Pro Style, as well as commenting and subscribing to the show and letting me know what you think. And also going to my Instagram and checking me out and checking the other things that I have going on. But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.
But behold, there is a warm breeze that comes from the west. The blazing sounds of victory fuel their everlasting quest. It is a call to arms, for they are here. An army that has the will to challenge and the will to dare.
Give